live from our studios in Tucson, Arizona. For the millions of fans listening around the world, from Long Realty with John Smith and Matt Bollinger, let's get ready to talk real estate.
Good afternoon and welcome to Real Estate Rumble. My name is John Smith. I'm here with my business partner, Matt Bollinger. Say something, Matt.
Something.
We could do something a little bit better than that. And we're also here with another business partner, Karla McMahon. Say something, Karla.
Yeehaw!
Oh, now she's a cowgirl. Okay, and I am very excited about our special guest today, Dustin Spivey. Dustin Spivey was actually my first client ever in real estate. He knew probably more than I did at that time. Okay, and that's sad.
That's terrifying.
But say hello, Dustin.
Hello.
Okay, of course. Dustin, when he first walked into an open house, basically, we didn't know whether he could buy a house or not. So tell me a little bit about what that happened, Dustin, because if you can remember.
Oh, man. Yeah, this is almost 8 years ago now. Nikki and I were looking for our first house. I was working a lot, so she was kind of out doing a lot of the adventuring, but we saw a sign on this house we liked down like Speedway and Craycroft area. And
that was a crazy house.
Yes, it was. There was a lot going on in that house. Definitely some like artists or something lived in that house before. Very musical. I think the garage was like a music studio for like instruments or something. And then they had this like weird winding staircase to a loft.
And I'm not a slender dude. I'm kind of a little bit on the chubby side.
It was interesting.
Or the thick side, whatever you'd say. But I don't think I could get up the stairs. It was that steep. They were bad.
Yeah,
so I used to go, y'all go check that out. You know, but you walked in not knowing whether you could buy a house. And I think those were the words to me.
Yep. Never bought a house before. Didn't know if we could buy a house. Ran into you by chance. We were looking to meet with your team at the time. And you showed up and you're like, I've not really done this before. Look around, ask me questions. And that's pretty much how the beginning of that went.
Honesty is the best policy
no idea.
there. I set low expectations.
And honestly, that was one of the reasons we wanted to stick with you. You just told it how it was. You said, I don't know this, but I'll find out, which is my favorite thing to hear from almost anyone I work with, anyone I employ. I don't know, but I'll find out is probably like my favorite.
Well,
phrase.
one of the reasons I wanted to have you as a guest, you have experienced home buying from beginning to a weird, different kind of market where interest rates, I believe, were in the 5s at the time, if I recall. And you've gone to the Corona interest rates, which plummeted everything. And then now we're back up. And you have not only purchased at a low rate, but then you also refinanced at some point, if I recall.
Yep.
And then you have tried to make purchases in this market, not any fault of your own that we weren't successful.
Yep.
But so I kind of wanted to get like a full 360 on what that you thought that looked like in your experience. Listen, you know that we're great agents, so we could sit here all day and talk about how amazing you are.
Yeah.
All you have to do is ask us. So I don't want this to turn into a major endorsement, which I just turned it into. But what I want to hear is frustrations. Was it easygoing? Was it? I mean, I recall, if you don't mind me saying, you had gotten hired by Raytheon, and then a lender that we had been using, actually used your school as your work experience.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so you did you not remember that?
No.
Okay, so you didn't have a job before, right? And then so they used your grades.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I do remember.
Yeah, I remember getting the transcripts ready for that now. That's right.
Yeah, and so that's
Was that Mary?
That was Mary.
Yep.
So so when you first went in to buy a house, tell us a little bit. Was you nervous? Was you a little shaky? Did you think it wasn't going to happen? Did you think I was crazy?
Still think you're crazy.
Okay, that's probably fair.
Yeah. Definitely worried. That's a big thing. It was our first real financial major purchase, and we were coming out of college poor as hell, and I'd been working for a few months, so money was just weird that it even existed at that point. And making a financial lock on a decision like that was very stressful.
So
at the time,
one compliment I'm going to give you as a first-time home buyer, he set a realistic budget for himself.
Very important.
Yeah, man, how many times do we have first-time home buyers who got qualified for a certain amount, and then they shop at the top of that amount?
Every time. Almost every time.
In fact, my budget was so reasonable that I think it frustrated the hell out of you. And it continues to frustrate the hell out of you years later.
But you know what? The money that we could buy houses at that price at that time. It was not an unreasonable ask. Yep. You purchased the house. Your wife picked out the house, I think, probably more so. And we know she loves it.
Yes, she
and
does.
so it's been that way. So you've been there for 8 years.
Yep.
One of the things that you use, and if you guys could jump in, because you guys got some experience as well as with people with down payment assistance programs. What was your experience like that? And be truthful, because I know some people are happy they did it. Some people wish they never did it. What about you?
I'm happy I did it, but I wish I knew a little bit more before I did it. Not about the terms of the first-time home buyer program, but I wish I had really the forethought to refi sooner on it than I did. I should have just got it and then refied it right away. I personally,
right,
because the rates were lower,
right,
than they were with the first-time home buyer program. But you look at that right now, and anyone would jump on it.
Right,
in a
and
second.
so I think it's like a point.
It was 425.
Okay,
at the time,
and that's with down payment assistance.
That was with down payment assistance.
So was that one of the programs that
they gave me
every
10% so long as I lived in the house for 5 years?
Okay, all right.
5 years.
And then if you didn't live in the house,
or refinanced it. You could live in it for 5 years or refinance it, and then
I could refi, but the assistance was on a separate loan that would be forgiven if I lived in the house for 5 years.
Okay.
So I would still have to pay back that separate loan if I refied the original loan.
Okay, but it was prorated.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think on some, not every down payment assistance program is.
That's what I was asking. Yeah, if it built if you got 20% per year for 5 years, or if that's how.
I don't think I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 5 years or nothing.
5 years, or you got to pay it back.
Yep.
Okay. Wow. So the important lesson there is, if you're going to do down payment assistance, make sure you read the fine print. Make sure you have a fluid discussion with your lender. I wouldn't suggest going to your agent ever and talking about lending, because we do not. Yeah, the last person you want is me.
We'll say we don't know, but we can find out.
That's right, because we're the source of the source, right?
Which is my favorite answer.
Right?
Gotcha.
I don't know. I can't answer that. That's my favorite answer. Yep. I don't know. Got to get an expert. And so then through COVID, you stayed in the house. Okay.
Yes. Obviously,
they're there. They've started growing their family. And then you refied during COVID?
Yes.
Okay. Why?
Rates were stupid low.
Right?
Yeah.
So you were at 4.25, and then you decided.
So I did refi. I didn't refi prior to that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think it was COVID you've refied.
Yep.
Yeah.
I refied during COVID, and that brought me to
3. Well, so that's every point's money. That's how I look at it. Heck, even half a point's money.
So I got a question about that. So now does the 3% mortgage rate that you have now impact your decision in turning out to look for something else, because it's tough to get away from that mortgage?
Sometimes, for sure. Yeah, you definitely, you're hearing a lot, and I know you guys in this office say it, right? Marry the house, date the loan, or some terminology.
Date the rate.
Date the rate.
And if you say that wrong,
there's some form of that, going around real estate, and that I struggle with that one for sure, because you don't know. It's not a sure thing when rates are going to come down, or if it's going to be in your favor, and keeping that 3% is beneficial.
So do you feel that you're kind of stuck in your house? Because I mean, you have the ability to go buy a house if you want. I understand that, but the rate is so good, and Dustin is so money conscious. Yeah. That was a very polite word that says he squeaks when he walks. He's so money conscious that I see you having a hard time making that decision.
Yeah, I don't think I'm worried about.
First of all his
house.
friends are going to be happy that I said he squeaks when he walks.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
That's fine. I don't feel trapped in the house.
Okay.
I feel like I have options, just because the rental market is such that I could rent it out and get another house without it being that much of a deal. The rent income would offset the new rates and my new mortgage comparably enough for it to be okay.
Now,
does
still
the
kind
rental
of taking the advantage of that 3% mortgage either way.
Yep.
Not the only time you wouldn't is if you sold it to have to pull money out in order to get that down payment for the next house.
Yep.
Okay, but here's where I see things going a little wrong there on that thinking, right? Because the minute your rental house becomes a rental house, then you're not living in the house, which is an agreement of sometimes your mortgage. Okay, and there could be
typically you can rent them. It just possibly changes your tax status down the road.
And insurance.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
you need to understand the whole process of it and the whole all the information that goes into the decision that you make.
Yep.
If it becomes an investment for the purpose of it staying an investment, then yes, it can. Somebody else is paying off the house.
Yep.
Unless they miss a rent payment.
Somebody's paying off most
that-
of the house. Then.
Well, I like the rental because then you can rent it for whatever above your mortgage payment, put a little in a savings that anytime that house needs any repairs, it pays for itself. And I will say in 2020, we bought a place and interest rate was great. And they're like, well, are you going to live here for... Well, we could if we could have that interest rate, but we're like, well, we would rather have this little higher interest rate and refi our home that we live in and remodel it and have that interest rate. So to answer that question, like if you buy a house and get that interest rate and live in it for 5 years, you've already lived in it for 5 years, now you can rent it out and still have that interest rate. And yeah.
Please check with your accountant on any information
Yeah,
given.
of course.
But
Other
I
things
am
to
not
be
an
aware of
accountant.
is, like,
I'm not an expert.
Okay, but wait,
like
information.
property
But
gains
And I'm
tax.
not a
that's where I'm
lender,
going.
but-
That's where I'm going
Yeah.
next.
Yes.
And there are certain stipulations as to how long you
Sure.
have to have lived in the house to not, have to deal with certain property gains, or your property
Yep.
gain liability will be
But that's if
lessened,
you
or-
sell the house and you lived in it 3 of the last 5 years.
Yep.
But what happens
I think it's
the
2.
minute you turn it into an income property, then it's looked at totally different, right? Because now
Temporarily, yeah. You
It
can always
is.
move back into it if,
Yep.
if that was
If you have to.
something that you wanted
Put it
to
in
do.
an LLC, so keep it away from you.
But again,
so
we're
you
not
don't get-
CPAs, so
We're not. Okay,
supposed to
sorry,
comment
I'm
on
going down a
taxes.
little wrong path. But I like that you have options and you know you have options.
Well, I think the consumer needs to pick up out of this is if you've picked up from the very beginning, he set a budget, he didn't go beyond that budget, okay, and he taught me as a brand new agent, taught me that if I made him go beyond that budget, he was going to get a new agent. Not that we're at odds, but he made it perfectly clear. So he took control of our transaction. Okay. He led the transaction with his expectations, which is amazing for an agent, right? Because you don't know when to push. You don't know when to go, hey, would you like to look at a house $10,000 more? Well, the answer is no. If they give you a budget, we want to stick to the budget. And then when we stick to that budget, the only time I would ever go over someone's budget if they threaten to fire me for not writing something over budget. Okay. But other than that, I'm going to play the figure. They're going, hey, remember that conversation we had? And we learned. And that even when I took his wife out to go look for houses because he had to work. I think his first question, how much is it?
Every time.
Every time.
So let's
Every
put this
time.
in
Well,
a,
because the other question is, does my wife like it? And she would answer that already.
Yes.
So put it in
She
a-
wouldn't
a-
be asking me whether we had the budget if she didn't like it.
a different perspective. If you were a first-time home buyer now,
Yes.
where values are now,
Yeah.
how would you handle that in terms of sticking to a first-time home buyer budget, which is not everybody, but the majority of people who are looking for the first time or buying a house that's not at the top end of the market, obviously. So how would that change now, being that more was available and the options were there? Would it, or would you just say, I'm going to wait?
I don't know, but budgets changed too, right? My budget now is not.
I know your budget,
the
but if
budget
you
I
were-
had then.
Same
right?
thing. Same budget.
No, sure.
I don't know if you could get a house with that same budget.
Absolutely not. So for clarity, we got our house for $155 in 2016.
Yeah.
Closed in 2017, I think. Nothing like that anymore.
But still
unless
set a
it's missing
budget,
roof.
still try to keep that on track. That would be the goal.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to scale your personal finances if you don't have the room to scale. And if you are pinching every inch of your budget to live in your house, then that doesn't leave much room for giving yourself options.
Right.
So I personally would, of course, try to stay as reasonable as I can within a certain percentage of my take-home pay.
Which sounds like to me, he set a budget, he held to a budget, and he didn't let anybody talk him out into a budget. Not that we were trying to do that, whether it was relatives. I even remember a friend of his purchased a house through me as well, and he advised them. He goes, "Y'all are spending way too much money on your house. You're all remember that?
Sorry.
Y'all are spending way
Yes.
too much money." And they came to me and said, "Dustin says we've spent way too much money." I said, "Quit talking to Dustin." Okay, no. It was all in good. But so the market, where are we at on interest rates? Did they quote those to them today? Somewhere between 6 and 7 right now?
Yeah,
On the high
they're
side?
on the high end of the 6s or 7. Yeah.
Okay. We just put a house under market at $260,000. Okay. That payment's $1,800. $1,800. I remember my first house that I bought almost in the 4s, and it was less than that.
Yep.
Now, we talked interest rates last time, so we're not going to beat that dead horse, okay? But here's this problem. You want to buy a house, you're going to have to, give up 3 points in the wrong direction just to keep mama happy. Now, is that something as a first-time home buyer, somebody who's refinanced, and you're financial savvy, okay? I will never be able to get his head out of that door. But he's financial savvy, and he's a smart guy, and he takes time to do these things. Would you suggest that everybody sits down and takes a look at their budget, and house purchase is not just a knee-jerk reaction, not a...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Even though there's a
without
lot
question.
of people that do it, right?
Yeah, I think the majority of people do it.
Yeah. The amount of first-time home buyers last year, I believe, if the number's close, was about 35% of the market.
I believe that's correct.
35% of the market, which is way down from
first-time home buyers?
First-time home buyers. Thanks for correcting me.
And apparently that hasn't changed for years.
It was in the 40s in 1987. Now, don't ask me how I know this, but Google's one hell of a
surprised that the percentage is still that high.
In
Even
1987,
in the
I think interest
economy.
rates were like an 11, 12, 13%.
Yep.
Okay. So even like Ryan said, we're still at all-time lows comparatively. Okay. On the average.
On average, yeah.
Okay. But people are still hesitant. What do you think?
You got to weigh income versus cost of houses now too,
Yeah.
right? Like the income to
Yeah.
cost of house ratio was way different, back then when interest rates were in the 11s, 13s than they are now. Salaries just have not at all kept up with the rate of
When rates were like in
costs, et cetera.
1980 or 81 or whatever, when rates were 17, 18, 19%,
Yep.
it was like home prices were like 2 times annual salary or something like that. I mean, totally
wedding
different than
ring
what we
now.
have now.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally different than what we're looking at now. And so that perspective is very different for people when they're going out to look. We're in a 2-income house buying market pretty much everywhere now. I mean, it's tough on one.
Okay,
to make that
so
happen.
let's just say you have. I know people who have. It seems like an endless supply of money, resources, etc. But it seems like those are not the ones that are looking to buy a big house. Most of those people that I run into have done just what Dustin's done, which was basically plan out, only buy what they need to be comfortable.
I think that's changing too. I think people are not buying the McMansion anymore.
McMansion,
Yeah, they're
the
buying
term.
they're buying something that it has enough space for them and their family, or maybe a little room to grow, whatever. And they'd rather spend their money on taking some vacations with their family or their spouse or whatever. So that perspective is different than it was 15 years ago. Also,
Well, families were smaller back then, don't you think? So, I mean, look at the houses around Tucson, right?
I
Military
don't think
houses.
so.
I think rate of having kids is declining.
Well, oh, do you?
Yeah.
Now, speaking of having kids,
Yes.
I heard a little rumor you have a little one.
Yes.
And how old's he now?
He is 3.
Okay, how does that make your life perspective change? Because now you
a
don't
lot.
necessarily have to worry about just you and your wife.
Yeah.
Now you got kids.
Yeah. Well, we have the almost 17-year-old in the house
she's that
too.
old. Wow.
Yes, she is that old now.
Wow, I'm old.
Yeah. So we have her and the 3-year-olds. Your priorities are on their success, and what's going to set them up in their future. I could honestly, for the most part, care less about my own finances if it does not pertain to how successful they're going to be. And that's where I kind of shifted everything. It's now it's about generational wealth. It's not about me and my financial needs or my housing needs or any of that. It's about stability in a school system and not changing that up. So all those types of things play into whether I'm interested in looking at a different house too. It's not just the finances. It's the area. It's the schools. It's the safety. It's the noise pollution. All these things that I couldn't give 2 shits about 8 years ago. So all of those things definitely change perspective.
And so,
on
what you
what
just told me,
finances
basically,
living.
your next house, there's other things to look at than just money. Okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Now, don't get me wrong, money comes a big play because somebody's got to pay for that thing.
Peace of mind is important too, and I call that the my anxiety tax, or or my my anxiety tax. The money I'm willing to spend to like have peace of mind or not be unsettled or be worried about things, and that sometimes outweighs just the like numbers to numbers for sure.
So Matt, your kids, they're a lot younger than Dustin, I believe. But what is their perspective on all this? And same thing with you, Karla. You've got kids that are around this age that will be moving out soon if they already haven't, right? Some of them are renting, some of them own. So, what is your thought on that? I mean, do you have the same theory? Is it's your job to make sure that they understand that process and what should be prioritized when the time comes?
I do. I think my kids are just out of college and working or getting ready to graduate from college. So the information or the conversations that we have are about what do they need to do so that they have the ability to do the things like buy a house or set themselves up for their future. So there's a lot of questions in terms of value and price and things like that they have, but they're in that position that you were in at first where the budget was the most important piece. And now Dustin's in a different position where he's talking about it in terms of family or peace of mind or things like that. I think at that age when you're just starting out, you kind of look around and go, man, how am I ever going to be able to do this? So we have tried to step in and help speed that process up for the same reasons that Dustin gave. It's changed over the, our lives in terms of what's important and where we think that money is best spent. And I think that part of it for us is to try to help, as long as they're not give, but help. It's more of as long as they're doing the things that they need to do, then we're happy to participate. So that's kind of where that generation is the worries are there because of values and interest rates and those things. But again, that's no different than it's been forever for first-time home buyers. So that too shall pass, I guess is kind of how it is. And their lives will move on and they'll become, more successful and they'll make more money as long as they continue to work. And I think that, things will work themselves out. It's just really hard for, I think, young people that are just starting out to say, how am I going to do this? But that hasn't changed. Like I said, it's been the same for decades.
Well, hey guys, let's take a really quick break, and then what we'll do is we'll come back and have Karla answer the same question because I know she's over there hopping in her chair and wants to talk about her kids because that's one of the most important things in her life. So this is John Smith and Matt Bollinger with Real Estate Rumble. We'll be back with Dustin Spivey and somebody who's ran the gamut of home purchases from first-time home buyer to experienced home owner. So give us a little bit. We'll be right back. If you have any questions about today's show, feel free to reach out to us directly at smithandbollinger at longrealty.com. And always remember, we're here for you for all your real estate needs. Whether it's residential, commercial, investment, or land, we got you covered. Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Rumble with John and Matt. Once again, I'm here with Karla, Matt, and our special guest, Dustin Spivey. And we're kind of talking about the home buying experience from the very beginning on the first-time buyer process, all the way to refinancing, to all the way about thinking about buying another house when interest rates are high, low, or in the middle. But right before the break, we were talking to Karla about her kids and what her kids and her strategy is with them, because they did doing something a little different, right, Karla?
Well, my kids are about the same age as Matt's kids. I have one year left in college. I have one that has moved to Colorado Springs, and
She's a vet.
she works at the zoo. She's a zookeeper at the Colorado Springs Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. So my kids have talked about, Caitlin went to Colorado with the savings account. She hard worker, but she still has it. She never asked us for help with rent, so she does have to dig into that a little bit.
So why didn't she buy, Karla? Because
right now, she doesn't know, first of all, where she's going to be in the next year or two. She's not sure she's going to stay at this zoo. There could be a opening in the Denver Zoo or the Cincinnati Zoo. She wants to stay with animals, but she doesn't know that she's going to stay there, so she doesn't want to spend her, savings in a house that she may not live in the next 2 years.
I'm going to stop real quick because I got a question for Matt on that. Matt, does that make financial sense? Can you invest your money into real estate and get a better rate of return than you would if you left it in the bank, depending on where it is, or is that just another gamble?
Is an impossible question to answer, but
It is.
it's all personal. It's all about personal goals. I can fully respect, where your daughter's coming from.
I'm only
in
allowed
terms
to
of
push that button twice.
not knowing where she's going to be. I think if she gets established somewhere and she feels like it's the right time, then it's the right time. But there's nothing wrong with renting until you're ready. I mean, there's nothing in the market that says you have to do this. Somebody could rent for their whole entire lives and be just fine.
But if
and
COVID
be
hit-
set up financially. I mean, they could do other things with their money instead of real estate. I mean, it's
Right, if
all
you're
what
not
you
ready.
do with your money.
Yeah.
If you're
And
not ready, a money market, a high yield savings account, something like that, at least, it's not in a federal credit union where it's like 0.012%.
And it's
on
a
your
lot more
money or
liquid
something,
than real estate.
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right, but what if interest
Yes.
rates drops down to COVID? What if they go down to the 2s?
I'd buy 3 houses tomorrow.
So if you had a lot of disposable income, my daughter doesn't have a lot of disposable
She's got
income.
that sweet bank account.
So, but would she have to put it all down for
Yeah.
because the prices are so expensive? Maybe Colorado's a little higher than Tucson.
I think where we're getting out of this is,
But it is-
it's all personal.
Even what you think's a lot, like that's maybe 3% of a house because homes are on the high side right now. So, and then you would leave, and we've taught our kids, you need to have long-term savings, short-term savings, at least 3 months of your income in case you lose your job, so she doesn't want to work for
So in
5
other
years
words, she's being smart.
to build that up.
So who taught her that, Dan or you?
Oh, that'd be
Sounds
Dan.
like Dave Ramsey.
Would that be the Dave Ramsey?
Dustin.
You got
Dustin Ramsey.
Sounds like Dave Ramsey. You got your savings account, your 3 months savings aside.
It was Larry the bread man who also told us
Okay,
don't go
who-
25% of your.
Who is Larry the
income.
bread man? Because I've heard of the milkman, and that's a whole other conversation. So who's this bread man dude?
When we first got married and had no money, we went to this coffee bus that was parked at Craycroft and Broadway. And he would come in every day, and we'd be there, and we just started a conversation.
Yeah,
and
I
he
thought
was
you were
a
going to say he was running it. I'm like, taking your financial advice from the coffee cart.
And he was just a financial advisor.
good
We had
advice,
no
too,
idea,
actually.
right?
Really
we
good
just
advice.
started talking because I like to talk to people. And he said, in my past life in New York, I owned a bread company, but liked finances so much. And so we called him Larry the Bread Man. And he's the one that told us the long-term savings, short-term savings, and the 25% of your income should go to your mortgage and no more than that, so you can have a life.
On the break, which is all great advice, by the way. Okay.
But I'm not a financial advisor, so.
Okay, but we can ask Dustin what he does. How does he figure his budget out? I want to know, what point did he get that savvy to know that it was something that he had to take on, right? Because when you're first out of, let's just say, high school, college, you're not exactly financial savvy.
They don't teach
on
that
everything.
stuff in high school.
They
They,
don't teach
they
that stuff.
don't. And one of the first bits of financial advice I got as an adult was to take out a cash advance on a credit card at 29% to buy a used vehicle. Right?
Nice.
Great advice, right?
That right. That
That's
kind
your
of
drunk roommate.
yeah, it was somebody, but and I took that advice, and I was paying for that Jeep for 3 years after I sold
The
the thing.
tuition for that course was expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, a series of those types of events through young adulthood. I'm, with my wife, she was my wife at the time too, while we were going through college. We're probably $30K in consumer debt, not including student loans, and, just kind of tail up on everything. And I'm just like, I cannot do this anymore. And I'm just finishing up school, finishing up college, and I'm stocking groceries at an Albertsons overnight. So kind of splitting my days. It's like sleep, work, sleep, school, sleep, work, sleep, school. And that's kind of what I was doing. And I just was like, this isn't going to work for me. And I just downloaded a shit ton of financial audiobooks, financial podcasts, everything I could find to learn about money. And I just listened to that shit while stocking shelves at a grocery.
What was the best one?
Figured it out. I would say the best one changes over time for me based on my financial needs and kind of my understanding and where I'm at. Like, I mentioned it a minute ago. Dave Ramsey was huge for me at the beginning. I don't really care for a lot of his advice long term, and I feel like he's a little bit out of touch just with like people and their needs. But you know, from a get out of debt perspective, it's like you have to understand your priorities, understand what are actually needs and what are, you know, wants or kind of like mental allowances you give yourself. Like, you know, I don't think anyone's a stranger to, well, I worked hard, so I deserve, or, you know, some mental perspective like that, right?
Guilty.
That's pretty common.
But it's, yeah, for sure. But it's such a dangerous perspective, and
It
it
is,
stops
yeah.
you from like really understanding your financial goals. So really like realizing that the only way I'm going to get out of this is if I shift that and just know money and let money work for me. That mental shift was probably, you know, the start of all that.
So I gotta say,
love that.
I am one of those guys that, to me,
Yeah.
if I work hard and I support my family, my bills are paid.
Yes.
When I do get paid, I do earn some money. I feel like I need to buy myself something for it.
Well, I think there's a time for that in your life.
For sure.
It's just not the
Okay.
time
It's when
he's
you're
talking
50.
about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not necessarily, but there's also so much of like, well, this thing is going to be the thing that brings me joy with my money, and
For like a day or two.
right. And if you really think about a lot of things, like you can find the same amount of enjoyment out of something that is financially less, you know, extravagant.
Right.
You know, I can have just as much fun grabbing coffee with my wife as I can going to an extravagant dinner. Right. So there's no reason why, you know, the more financially extraneous thing has to be the thing when we can have, you know, equal fun and enjoyment out of something that is more financially
simple.
Responsible.
I think the number one waste of money in my family is going to dinner often.
Oh my God. Yeah.
You know, having kids cured that for us. Like,
Well, they don't like
true,
the
'cause
food
you
we
don't-
have anymore. So
yeah,
they got jobs. They can feed
you know,
themselves.
everyone asks us how expensive. Like, we have a lot of younger engineer friends, and they're just starting to think about having kids, and they're like, I can't even like wrap my head around the cost of having kids. And I'm like, I saved so much money when I had kids. I don't think you understand like what a positive impact
Yeah,
that had
me
on
too.
our finances. Just because like, you know, I don't
You're
want
not
to go
going
out.
out
I
to
don't want
eat,
to haul.
right?
Like, we were going out all the time. I don't want to haul them out and like try to have a great dinner and then being pissed off that, you know, whatever's on the menu isn't whatever they had in their head. Or, you know, my teen daughter who thinks like sushi and steak is the standard and not like, you know, something else. So
we dressed our
We
kids
went
from
through that
Costco,
phase.
I
Interesting.
think,
Yeah.
because
Costco pizza. That was,
I mean, we dressed our kids from Costco. They didn't need to go and get designer. I mean, they threw up on them. They spit up on them. They did other things in them.
you turn that cart backwards, and they're in the front going backwards, and your husband's going 20 miles an hour in the parking lot. They think that's like the best.
They think it's the fair.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if you could give a first-time home buyer or just somebody that, because it's not even an age thing. No. I've had people at 60 try to buy a home, and they didn't realize that they could. They had $30,000 in the bank, and they had a credit score over 700, and they thought, well, maybe we'll just get one of those rent-to-owns, right? People need to realize that they just need to look into home buying because they might be able to save themselves a substantial money, and they might be able to have homeowners. Excuse me. So if you had to give anybody some piece of advice before they made the decision to buy a house, what would it be?
Man, one, I understand your finances for sure. You know, I'm big on that. You give me crap about it all the time because I'm a numbers guy.
And it's great. I think it's amazing.
You have to understand not only your current finances but your financial goals, and how that plays into, you know, enabling your financial goals.
Wait, so if I just come up with $30,000 to put down on a house, I mean, I've got it, right? I'm a homeowner now. I don't need any more money.
Till your hot water heater goes out, your garage
Right.
door opener
Yep.
goes out.
You need to
Yep.
change the carpeting and paint the
Yep.
house.
And that was going to be the next thing, is understand the house that you are buying. That is something we didn't care for as much when we were first buying a home. John knows. We're like, you know, everyone's cousin who's a plumber, come and check this thing out. Keep our inspections low. Man, that was stupid.
They were advised against it.
Huh? Yeah, I was advised against it. You know, so buying a house is expensive, and that's not just the down payment. You need to put the money into making sure that it is a safe purchase. And that is that's one thing I just like carried with me. I know you sat in a house with me for 3 hours for me to pay inspections for something that I was like, yeah, no, totally okay that I'm okay that I blew this money on the inspections. You know, I'm okay that I blew the money on the inspections. The inspections came out showing me that it wasn't the right property.
Right.
You know, extension cords stuccoed into the house, you know, running from one end to another or whatever.
I can find you some gems.
No, for sure. There's always weird things. I've put some of those weird things in my own house for sure.
We do not know anything about those, nor should we disclose.
I did not elaborate. But you know your finances and know.
So that's number one.
And number two too, right? Know what you're buying when you buy a house.
Then number three.
But it's not just the mortgage payment. I think that's
absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's mortgage payment. It's PMI, which we had early on. And
what's PMI? Tell them.
Private mortgage insurance,
Yep,
I believe is the acronym. And I believe if you have a loan to value ratio of like above 80%, you have to have a PMI. I don't know if that's still true, but it was then. And not only that, but you have to pay it down past 78% or lower to have them automatically remove it without you like being aware and calling the lender and telling them to remove your PMI. So that's like an additional expense on your monthly payment. And then, home insurance and homeowners insurance, or property insurance and homeowners insurance. And then, anything else that gets wrapped up in escrow.
Right.
And then
maintenance, everything else.
Taxes. There's taxes when you own a home.
And that roof, that air conditioning, that saguaro cactus
Appliances,
that the
if they
neighbor
didn't
has
have
that falls in your yard.
I mean, curtains.
Yeah.
The amount of people who walk in the house and they're like, this house is great. And then it's like, man, just the curtain rods and curtains alone are going to set me back on every window in this house. Like, you don't really think about those things.
You don't, because you're so enamored with the house, right?
I'm getting a house, baby.
Right?
Like
that's it. And so a lot of people, that's kind of how flips kind of come in, is everybody goes in and they just see all that pretty stuff, right? They see that new tile, they see that new paint. And so they're like, this is the one. And then when they unearth the electrical cord in the wall.
Yes.
And so basically what you're saying is that the benefit and the enjoyment of the home, having planned ahead of time, is significantly better, significantly higher than the alternative.
Yeah.
So because of the planning that you did ahead of time, you were in a lot better position to be able to take care of some of those other things.
Yeah, I'd actually say I lacked to plan on some of those things. I had the finances on lock, but like I said, I didn't give a crap about the state of the house. I cared whether I could afford the house.
Okay.
And I paid the cheapest person I could find to inspect the house and tell me, like, just give me the green light so I can move into this thing and feel good about it, you know? So I definitely have paid for that decision over years too. So, make sure you understand the property you're buying and that you're truly okay, with the things that, come up in any property, because there's things in any property.
Things will always come up.
So we're going to get ready to wind up. Okay, but I wanted to point out a couple things. One, Dustin, thanks for taking the time.
I appreciate it very much.
I know
Dustin,
you worked
thanks.
all day. Number two, I remember when I brought Dustin his keys for the very first time, he was having a bunch of people move in, and I stood in their living room, and I was all proud that I sold a house. My wife had to say, "It's time for us to leave."
We were hanging out.
I was hanging out. I was part of the party.
This is work. Let's go.
That's it. So, thanks again. Yep. Appreciate you taking the time. We'll definitely have
great
you back.
info.
Just
Appreciate
great
it.
info for anybody not anybody that's just a first time home buyer. That's anybody that's a home buyer. I think financials is your first step. I can get you a house. I can find you a house, and I could probably find a lender that'll finance that house for you, one way or another. But you got to be able to afford it. I don't want you to be house broke.
Right.
Okay.
Know what you're getting into.
I want you to sit in a house that has no curtains.
Yeah.
And you're sitting on the floor and wondering, guess I'm going to have water for dinner. I mean, there is people out there for a long time that can just afford to sit in their house. Yep. That is never a goal, right?
Right.
So, Matt, you want to say anything in closing?
I appreciate it very much, Dustin, for coming in and giving a lot of good information. I think it'll be helpful for somebody who's out there thinking about what their next step's going to be in terms of buying a house or just planning to buy a house. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
Karla, can I get a big yeehaw?
A big yeehaw. And I do love, it when you don't have a lot of money and you have to spend that $400 for a home inspection, You just have to know, like you said, it is going to be worth it in the next 5 years.
Yep.
Because if I don't spend that $400 finding something, a $5,000 thing that maybe a home inspector could have found out.
Yep.
And also, I don't want to encourage people to rent if they can buy, but also
Sometimes
when you're young and you're in your 20s and you can call someone and say, hey, come fix this. And
Yeah. There's a lot of appeal to that, in that to me currently.
And not to go long, but people in California have to rent. because they can't
absolutely.
afford
And
to
yeah. And,
I mean, which
you
is
can't live with your parents
There's a lot of
forever,
people-
Caitlin and
here
Kevin.
that are in that situation. A lot of people here. There are a lot of people everywhere that are in that situation. It's just understanding where you are. I think that's the big takeaway for me that Dustin brought up is understanding where you are financially now, understanding what your goals are going forward, and is now the right time to accomplish the first step of that and then move towards accomplishing the longer term goals. But I think to really, really sit down and put pen to paper and understand where you are financially is obviously, it seems like it should be obvious, the first step, but it's the most important one. And I think that you pretty much explained that to everybody.
Yeah, and if it takes a year or two to get there, good for you.
So hey, this is our episode number 2. We're going to wrap it up again. Thanks to Dustin, Karla, and of course Matt. Matt and John's known as the heavyweights in the real estate business for a reason.
Not
The gun show.
Not funny.
Not funny. I'm looking slim.
Round of applause.
Okay. But thanks for joining us, and we'll be back in next week. I think we got another one coming. Please, if you ever have any questions, please give us a call. All right. Thank you again. Thanks, Dustin. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Real Estate Rumble. It is proudly produced and edited by Unestablished Media. If you're looking to start your own podcast or are in need of social media services, design work, or even website creation, check out our website at unestablishedmedia.com. Thanks.